They say money can buy anything, but can it buy forgiveness? Can it buy a second chance at love life and even freedom from regret? Once upon a time, in the gilded penthouses of Manhattan, a powerful millionaire attempted the unimaginable, erasing his pregnant wife's name from his will. He thought no one would discover his betrayal. He thought he could keep it hidden behind sealed documents and ironclad lawyers. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, and in the most dramatic of turns, a single letter read aloud in a hushed courtroom would change everything he ever thought he controlled. In the hushed stillness of a late September night, Jordan Roth, heir to the sprawling Roth Global Investments empire, sat at the edge of his marble bathtub and stared at his reflection in the glossy black tiles. He could still hear the phone ringing in his mind, echoing like a persistent spectre. That call had rattled him to his core. Just an hour earlier, his attorney, Thomas Harrington, known among the elite of New York for his skill in navigating the murky waters of inheritance law, had delivered a piece of news that changed everything Jordan he had said. Firmly, the final draft of your will is ready. If you want to strike your wife's name, it needs to be done before the baby arrives. Are you absolutely sure Jordan's heart had hammered against his chest? He hadn't planned to do it so soon. He had harbored the idea for weeks, fueled by a tumult of doubts, insecurities, and outside influences. But the raw reality of hearing it spoken out loud made him feel like a man on the edge of a very steep cliff. He glanced out the window of his luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park. Twinkling city lights reflected on glass surfaces, the metropolis pulsing with life even at midnight. The view offered him no comfort now. Instead, it reminded him of everything he stood to lose and everything he might still gain if he took decisive action. He reached for his phone, considering a call to his wife, Sienna. She was staying with her close friend, Emily Henderson, in the Upper East Side townhouse. The official reason was that she wanted some peace and quiet before the baby arrived, away from the bustle and stress of Jordan's parties and business dealings. The unspoken truth was that Jordan and Sienna had argued bitterly about his lack of attention, about his ever-looming mother, Celeste Roth, and about his questionable finances. All of that had driven a wedge between them, a distance more glaring than the mere few blocks they now lived apart. Jordan didn't dial. Instead, his fingers hovered over the contact like they were weighed down by lead. He set the phone aside and sank into silent contemplation. She was 7 months pregnant, carrying the unborn child who would one day inherit everything. The thought of his child seemed foreign and terrifying. Was he ready for fatherhood? Could he trust Sienna not to destroy everything he had built if something ever happened to him? He stood, paced the room, and ran a hand through his slicked-back dark hair. A million scenarios played in his head. Finally, he exhaled in a single decisive motion. Yes, he would do it. He would erase her name from his will, at least for now. If she found out, the confrontation would be terrible. But in Jordan's mind, it was worth the risk to protect his empire. And if it came to a legal battle, Thomas Harrington was the best in the game. That night, Jordan Roth made one of the most significant decisions of his life, unaware of the avalanche of consequences that would soon follow. Jordan Roth had been a name whispered among New York high society ever since he was a teenager. His grandfather, the late Albert Roth, had established Roth Global Investments, focusing on real estate and venture capitalism. By the time Jordan was 22, he had graduated top of his class from the Wharton School of Business and immediately dove headfirst into the family enterprise. Under Jordan's leadership, Roth Global Investments took risky bets that paid off spectacularly. They funded groundbreaking tech startups in Silicon Valley, revitalized long-forgotten neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and even dipped their toes into the booming markets of Southeast Asia. At 35, Jordan Roth was already one of the most influential financiers in the country, frequently appearing in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and on CNBC. But power came with a price that Jordan had paid with every late night spent poring over contracts, every fleeting relationship that couldn't withstand the demands of his schedule, and the mounting sense of isolation that success can bring. When he finally met Sienna Gardner at a charity gala in the Hamptons, it felt like a ray of sunlight cutting through the fog. She wasn't a trust fund socialite. She was a literature graduate from Columbia who worked at a non-profit dedicated to improving access to education in underprivileged neighborhoods. Sienna's warmth and compassion drew Jordan in like a magnet. She spoke passionately about her projects, about wanting to make a tangible difference in people's lives. Jordan found her sincerity refreshing, a stark contrast to the endless string of sycophants that populated his orbit. A whirlwind romance ensued, complete with lavish trips to Paris and discreet dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. Within a year, they were married in an opulent ceremony at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The city's elite flocked to witness the union of a business magnate and an altruistic dreamer. At first, they were a formidable team. Sienna's philanthropic vision complemented Jordan's business acumen. With her guidance, Roth Global Investments started philanthropic initiatives, donating millions toward educational programs across New York. They even launched a scholarship fund in Sienna's name. Together they seemed unstoppable, a fairy tale power couple that graced every major magazine cover. Yet behind the scenes, cracks began to form. Jordan's mother, Celeste Roth, had never approved of Sienna. Celeste was the grand dame of the Roth fortune and believed that Sienna lacked the social pedigree to truly stand by Jordan's side. Subtle manipulations and microaggressions chipped away at Sienna's confidence. Jordan would often find himself caught between defending his wife and appeasing his mother, who, despite her gilded exterior, wielded immense influence over the family's finances and social connections. Slowly, the dynamic that had once brought Jordan and Sienna together began to shift. Jordan's hours grew longer. His temper grew shorter. Sienna felt sidelined, overshadowed by Celeste, and occasionally by Jordan's preoccupation with the business. Unvoiced resentments bubbled beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. Through it all, the empire continued to rise, dominating markets and stamping the Roth name onto the very fabric of New York City. But within the walls of their penthouse, the seeds of conflict had already been planted, ready to bloom into a crisis no amount of money could solve. Sienna grew up in a modest home in White Plains, New York, far from the diamond-studded avenues of Manhattan. Her mother, Grace Gardner, was a school teacher. Her father, Mark Gardner, worked as a high school guidance counselor. Together they instilled in Sienna a passion for learning and a heart for service. From an early age, she dreamed of becoming an author, someone who could use stories to inspire change. At Columbia University, she majored in English literature, immersing herself in the works of Toni Morrison, Jane Austen, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Her essays garnered attention from professors who praised her ability to connect literary themes with real-world issues. By the time she graduated, she secured a position at a non-profit devoted to literacy programs in underserved communities. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder, she spent her days organizing reading workshops and traveling to impoverished neighborhoods to distribute books. When she met Jordan Roth, she never planned on falling for a man of such staggering wealth. In fact, The ostentatious display of money usually turned her off. But Jordan seemed different. He listened intently when she spoke about her non-profit donating generously with no fanfare. He asked questions about her favorite authors, even reading a few of the novels she recommended. Their courtship felt like an improbable fairy tale. The heiress to a billion-dollar empire was not a cunning socialite, but a kind, thoughtful man who, despite his background, seemed genuinely invested in making the world a better place. In the beginning, she felt as if she was living a dream. His proposals to collaborate on philanthropic initiatives thrilled her. Sienna soon found herself at the helm of charitable foundations, dinners with influential politicians and celebrities, and the vibrant swirl of events in which they raised millions for good causes. She believed that together they could revolutionize philanthropy in the city. But adjusting to the Roth lifestyle wasn't easy. The hush of high-end boutiques and the glitter of social galas only reminded her of how far she was from her own upbringing. Celeste Roth, always impeccably dressed in designer suits, would often make well-meaning suggestions that came off as veiled criticisms, critiques of Sienna's attire or posture or even her speech. One must keep appearances dear, Celeste would say, as though Sienna were a servant to be trained. On top of that, Jordan's relentless schedule meant that he was seldom around. When he was home, his mind buzzed with numbers, mergers, and strategies. Sienna missed the days when he would sit with her in the library, both lost in quiet reading time, occasionally exchanging smiles or commentary on paragraphs they found enlightening. Her world was changing, growing bigger, but also more hollow. She kept telling herself that the philanthropic work she was doing mattered because it did. Yet she secretly longed for a simpler life, one where she and Jordan could just be two people in love. Not a power couple, scrutinized by paparazzi and overshadowed by corporate responsibilities. Then came the pregnancy, an unexpected surprise that thrilled her and terrified Jordan. She believed it would mend their drifting hearts, refocusing them on a common goal, building a loving family. Little did she know the unborn child would become a pawn in a dangerous game of power and legacy, one that would test her resolve like never before. Sienna felt the tension even before she saw the results of the pregnancy test. Jordan had been increasingly distant, slipping out early in the mornings for meetings and coming home late, often long after she had fallen asleep. On weekends, he would attend networking events under the guise of sealing deals, leaving her alone in their cavernous penthouse with only her books and philanthropic plans to keep her company. When she finally confirmed she was pregnant, her heart fluttered with hope. This baby could be a fresh start, a new reason for them to unite. She planned a small surprise dinner, cooking Jordan's favorite meal of garlic roasted lamb with rosemary potatoes. She set the table with the finest china-lit candles to cast a warm glow and waited. Jordan arrived almost 2 hours late, his shoulders heavy with tension. When she told him the news, his reaction was subdued, almost resigned. That's wonderful, he managed, forcing a thin smile. He rose from the table abruptly. I need a drink, he muttered, retreating to the bar. Their conversation that night lasted mere minutes before he claimed exhaustion and disappeared into the master bedroom, leaving Sienna alone with her half-eaten meal and flickering candles. In the days that followed, she realized Jordan's worries ran deeper than typical new father jitters. She overheard him talking on the phone with his mother, Celeste. I can't believe this is happening now when the business is expanding overseas, he hissed in hushed tones. Sienna felt a pang in her chest, a sense that she and the baby were inconvenient intruders in Jordan's meticulously laid plans. The situation worsened when Sienna, exhausted by her pregnancy, insisted Jordan hire additional staff for the philanthropic foundation. He resisted, citing budget constraints, despite the empire's massive profits. They argued. Words were said that neither of them could take back. Sienna accused Jordan of neglect and emotional distance. Jordan accused Sienna of not understanding the pressures he faced. She expected an apology. Instead, Jordan walked out, leaving her trembling with anger and hurt. Not long after that, Celeste began to visit more frequently. She showed up unannounced, eyeing Sienna's baby bump, with a mixture of disdain and forced warmth. Celeste would touch Sienna's belly, proclaiming the future grandchild would be the rightful heir to the Roth legacy. But her tone was clipped, almost as if she questioned Sienna's worthiness as the mother. On one particularly tense afternoon, Celeste left behind a stack of brochures advertising exclusive boarding schools and country clubs, "just so you can think ahead," she said, her eyes glittering with condescension. Sienna felt trapped. The man she loved had become a distant figure, tethered to her more by a shared address than by shared affection. Nights became anxious affairs of tossing and turning, her mind swirling with doubts about her marriage, her place in the Roth family, and whether Jordan even wanted this child. Something was brewing behind Jordan's cold stares, and she feared it more than she dared admit. Unbeknownst to her, the foundation of her life was quietly shifting beneath her feet, inching toward a catastrophic breaking point. No one understood the Roth empire better than Celeste Roth. She had married Albert Roth in her early 20s, climbing the social ladder as if destiny had decreed it. Even after her husband's death, Celeste remained the silent power behind the throne, expertly navigating charity circuits, private clubs and boardrooms. Her opinions shaped major decisions within Roth Global Investments, despite her not holding an official executive position. To those outside her inner circle, Celeste appeared regal and refined, always impeccably dressed in designer suits and draped in subtle diamond jewelry. She moved with graceful confidence, greeting acquaintances with a poised smile and an encouraging word. But behind the polished facade, Celeste had spent decades honing her ability to influence outcomes, often by planting seeds of doubt and orchestrating quiet manipulations. Her allies were fiercely loyal. After all, she made sure to reward them generously. But her enemies discovered the hard way that her social cunning was a weapon of unparalleled stealth. She was never fond of Sienna. To Celeste, Sienna was a kind-hearted idealist, lacking the killer instinct required to protect the Roth name. The moment Jordan announced his engagement, Celeste had launched a subtle campaign to undermine the relationship. She insinuated to Jordan that Sienna, with her non-profit background, lacked the worldly experience to manage the family's wealth. She urged her son to consider a prenuptial agreement, so complicated it would make any challenge to their finances nearly impossible. As soon as Sienna became pregnant, Celeste's misgivings turned into active concern. A child would mean a permanent link in the Roth lineage, something Celeste wanted to control absolutely. She didn't trust Sienna's naive altruism, as she called it. Over the next few months, Celeste quietly pressured Jordan to reconsider the terms of his will. She reminded him of cautionary tales where unsuspecting spouses walked away with fortunes, leaving the original family in disarray. "This is your legacy, Jordan," she would say softly, sipping her afternoon tea at the Plaza Hotel. "You need to be prepared for every eventuality. Love is fleeting, but the Roth name must endure. I wouldn't want you to leave it vulnerable." Jordan, burdened with his own doubts, found it increasingly difficult to argue against his mother's advice. Late at night, when he wrestled with insomnia, Celeste's words echoed in his mind. He pictured scenarios where Sienna could, through some twist of legal fate, dismantle the empire he and his father had spent a lifetime building. Though a part of him loved Sienna, he couldn't quell the fear that she might be more of a liability than a partner, especially with a child in the mix. The stage was set for a betrayal neither Jordan nor Sienna could fully predict. Celeste, the puppet master, pulled the strings expertly. By the time Jordan made the call to Thomas Harrington about revising his will, it was little more than a formality. The real plan had already taken root the moment Celeste Roth decided that her son's marriage and unborn child needed to be managed, if not controlled. Thomas Harrington, founding partner of Harrington & Lowe LLP, was a man who thrived in the shadows of corporate deals and estate planning. His office on the 50th floor of a gleaming midtown skyscraper provided a breathtaking view of Manhattan, though few clients took the time to admire it. They were too busy handing over the complexities of their fortunes for him to dissect and preserve. Thomas came from a long line of attorneys who served only the most elite clientele. He had represented business magnates, entertainment giants, and even a few foreign dignitaries. Jordan Roth was neither the first nor the richest, but he was certainly among the most complicated. Over the years, Thomas had crafted multiple prenuptial agreements, trust funds, and philanthropic structures for the Roth family. He was privy to their secrets, sworn to uphold confidentiality in exchange for exorbitant legal fees and long-standing loyalty. When Jordan called about removing his pregnant wife's name from his will, Thomas did not flinch. Instead, he asked for details. Do you intend to provide for the child separately? What about living expenses for Sienna should something happen to you? The questions, sterile and mechanical, were part of Thomas's routine. Emotions meant nothing in his world, only statutes, precedents, and bulletproof clauses. Jordan seemed agitated on the phone, his voice at times trembling with uncertainty. Yet he insisted on forging ahead. Yes, I still want to provide for the child, Jordan clarified, but only through a trustee. I don't want Sienna to have unfettered access to the inheritance. Thomas took note, scribbling complex legal jargon on a yellow notepad. This was not an unusual request among the ultra-wealthy, but it carried an unmistakable tension, particularly when dealing with an unborn child and a marriage that still existed on paper. They arranged a private meeting. That afternoon, Jordan showed up at Harrington & Lowe with restless eyes and a forced smile. He confirmed his intention to make Sienna a peripheral figure in his estate. We can keep her in for appearances' sake, Jordan explained, but her powers will be minimal. He talked about controlling the trust, placing Celeste as a secondary guardian if needed. Every arrangement was crafted to ensure Sienna would have as little influence as possible. Thomas methodically drafted the documents, weaving a tapestry of legal clauses that would stand the test of any courtroom challenge. Should Sienna contest it, we'll be prepared, he said, flatly, handing Jordan a thick dossier filled with complicated provisions. Jordan leafed through them, his brow furrowed. He signed wherever Thomas indicated each stroke of the pen, a subtle betrayal of his vows to Sienna. Thomas, for his part, was indifferent to the moral implications. His focus was on the technicalities, ensuring that no legal argument could overturn Jordan's decisions. He reminded Jordan that should he pass away unexpectedly, there would be a hearing. Sienna might attempt to challenge the documents, especially if she was blindsided. Jordan nodded, muttering something about how she wouldn't see it coming. The deal was sealed in under an hour. Jordan left the office with a manila folder under his arm, feeling a cold sweat on the back of his neck. It was done. All that remained was to keep it a secret at least until after the baby was born. In Jordan's mind, the matter was settled. But fate and a yet-to-be-written letter had other plans in store, plans that would rattle the gilded walls of the Roth Empire more violently than any legal clause could prevent. Sienna sensed the shift before she discovered the paperwork. Jordan grew more distant, as if physically present, but mentally on another planet. He began talking in circles about financial security, about setting up structures to protect their future. These conversations were always vague, but they left Sienna unsettled. She also noticed the covert phone calls. Jordan would abruptly leave the room whenever the phone rang, or he would text rapidly and close his screen whenever she drew near. He snapped at her when she inquired about his day, accusing her of prying. Their once peaceful routines, like a shared cup of tea before bed, or reading side by side in the library, vanished into the ether, replaced by tension and unspoken suspicions. One rainy afternoon, Sienna was sorting through the mail when she found a large envelope addressed to Jordan from Harrington & Lowe. She recognized the firm's name from previous philanthropic contracts. Curiosity mixed with dread gnawed at her. She knew she shouldn't open mail, not addressed to her, but her gut told her this was important. Hesitantly, she peeled it open. Her eyes scanned legal jargon she could barely comprehend at first. Revocation of spousal beneficiary. Status. Establishment of trust for minor child appointing. Celeste Roth as secondary trustee. The document outlined a revised will in which Sienna's role was almost non-existent. With each line she read, tears pooled in her eyes. She felt her heart pound violently against her ribcage. How could Jordan, the man she loved, the father of her unborn child, betray her so thoroughly? When Jordan arrived home that evening, he found Sienna in the living room, papers scattered across the coffee table. A single lamp illuminated her pale face, tear-streaked cheeks, and trembling hands. "What is this?" she asked, her voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. Jordan froze, guilt and panic warring in his gaze. He tried to stammer a justification. "It's complicated." "This is just a precaution." "A precaution against me," Sienna interrupted, tears giving way to a surge of anger. "I'm carrying your child, Jordan. Did you think I was going to steal your money? Or did your mother plant that idea?" Jordan's eyes flashed defensively. "Don't bring my mother into this," he snapped. "This is my decision. My responsibility. The business is at stake." They argued for what felt like hours. Every frustration, every doubt, and every perceived slight poured out from both sides. Jordan accused Sienna of failing to grasp the ruthless environment he navigated daily. Sienna countered that love should be based on trust, not legal documents designed to shut her out. Eventually, Jordan left, slamming the door so hard the walls trembled. Sienna collapsed onto the couch, clutching the documents that spelled out her erasure from Jordan's future. She couldn't believe how swiftly her life had unraveled. She worried about their unborn child, whose father seemed more concerned with his empire than with the well-being of his wife and baby. For the rest of the night, she lay awake, staring at the city lights outside her window. Her mind churned with heartbreak, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. She knew she had to protect herself and her child. But how? She felt powerless against a man who commanded armies of lawyers and the unwavering support of a mother whose influence reached every corridor of power in New York. In the days that followed her discovery, Sienna wrestled with how to confront Jordan. Their arguments had escalated to a level of hostility she had never witnessed before. He left the penthouse for extended periods, returning only under the cover of darkness. He scarcely spoke to her, beyond muttered questions about the pregnancy. She felt invisible, her importance reduced to mere function, the mother of his heir. Amidst her turmoil, Sienna recalled a conversation she'd had years ago with her college mentor, Professor Alicia Bennett. "When you have no voice," Professor Bennett had said, "put it down in writing. Words are powerful. They can change minds and hearts, even in a courtroom." Moved by those memories, Sienna decided to write a letter not to Jordan, who seemed deaf to her pleas, but to an authority who might actually read it with impartial eyes. Late one night, with only her bedside lamp illuminating her tears, she poured her heart onto paper. She recounted the early days of their romance, the kindness Jordan once showed her hopes for their shared future. She described how love eroded under the weight of corporate greed, meddling family members, and hidden agendas. She explained detail by painstaking detail how Jordan's betrayal made her feel afraid and alone. But she also wrote about her child and the dream that this baby could unite them in a way that money never could. Sienna didn't know if she would ever use the letter. Part of her considered mailing it to Jordan's attorney as a formal complaint. Another part thought about sending it directly to Judge Caroline Moore, a name she had gleaned from the estate documents. Judge Moore was scheduled to preside over any disputes related to the revised will if Jordan died, or if the matter was contested. Something about that felt drastic, almost too bold. She decided to stash the letter in a sealed envelope inside her desk, uncertain of its destiny. Little did she know a curious set of circumstances would place that letter in exactly the right hands at the right time. For now, it remained her private confession, an outpouring of raw honesty that would eventually hold the power to shift the course of her life. In writing it, Sienna felt a small measure of control. At least her side of the story was somewhere documented in her own words, unfiltered by lawyers or overshadowed by the Roth Empire's might. In a quiet moment, she placed a hand on her belly. The baby kicked a gentle reminder of the new life growing inside her. She whispered a promise, "I will protect you, no matter what." Over the next few weeks, as her pregnancy advanced, Sienna began to contemplate every possible outcome. She considered taking a legal route, but she was unsure if she could trust any attorney not tangled in the Roth family's network of influence. She thought about leaving, but that felt like surrender. Instead, she willed herself to keep the faith that somehow the truth would come to light, that love or justice or something far greater than Jordan's betrayal would intervene. Jordan Roth prided himself on being a step ahead in every deal, but even he was blindsided when a court summons arrived at the penthouse. He had been reviewing merger documents in his study when the doorman rang, informing him of an official delivery. The thick envelope bore the seal of the New York County Surrogates Court and included a notice for a hearing related to the estate of Jordan Roth. Confusion turned to anxiety as he skimmed the legalese, trying to make sense of it. He immediately called Thomas Harrington. "Why am I being summoned to Surrogates Court?" Jordan demanded, voice taut. Thomas sounded equally perplexed. "There's no reason for a hearing right now, unless someone filed a challenge," the lawyer replied. They agreed to meet the following morning at Harrington and Lowe. The next day, Jordan stormed into the law firm's conference room. "Who would challenge my estate?" he asked, pacing the marble floor. Thomas adjusted his glasses, scanning the summons. "It's an odd request. Typically these hearings occur after someone's passing or if there's a dispute from a living party with standing." Jordan froze. You think Sienna filed something? Thomas shook his head. She would have needed to do it openly, and I haven't received any complaint from her side. It's possible the court is reviewing the will proactively. Celeste Roth arrived unannounced, stepping into the conference room, wearing a tailored Chanel suit. She greeted them with a curt nod, anxiety evident in her darkly lined eyes. I heard about the summons, she said, settling herself in a seat without invitation. We can't let this blow up in public. The last thing the Roth name needs is a media circus. They spent hours dissecting every clause of the revised will, trying to determine if something triggered a judicial review. Perhaps a friend or a distant relative had raised concerns. Perhaps Sienna had confided in someone who took matters into their own hands. Jordan's frustration escalated with each unanswered question. Finally, Thomas arranged for a meeting with the court clerk. What they learned was both startling and mysterious. The hearing was initiated due to new evidence regarding potential challenges to the distribution plan for the unborn beneficiary. That was all the clerk would divulge. Jordan's mind raced. Someone was asserting that the unborn baby's rights might be compromised. But who? By the time Jordan left the courthouse, his heart pounded with dread. He had anticipated rewriting the will without interference. Now there was an official hearing in less than 2 weeks, and he had no idea who was behind it or what they planned to present. Sienna, meanwhile, received her own summons. She almost dropped the envelope when the process server handed it over her stomach, twisting into knots. She had not initiated anything she lacked the financial resources and legal knowledge to do so. Instinctively, her hand went to her belly. Could someone be fighting for her rights on her behalf? Or was it some elaborate scheme by Celeste? In a matter of days, their private war had escalated into a very public battle. Lawyers, family members, and spectators braced themselves for a showdown in Surrogate's court, where one letter still hidden away stood ready to tip the scales in unimaginable ways. The New York County Surrogate's Court was housed in an imposing building, its classical stone columns evoking a sense of solemnity. On the day of the hearing, a small crowd of journalists had gathered outside, alerted by rumors that the high-profile Jordan Roth and his pregnant wife Sienna would appear. Paparazzi snapped pictures as the couple arrived in separate black SUVs, each with their own retinue of attorneys. Jordan marched in, with Thomas Harrington at his side. Jaw-clenched gaze fixed straight ahead. Celeste followed close behind, her stony face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Sienna arrived minutes later, escorted by a new attorney she had hastily retained. Elise Rodriguez, a junior partner at a respected family law firm known for its integrity. Sienna appeared calm, even if her pale features betrayed her nerves. She gently cradled her belly, displaying a quiet determination. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, heavy with the smell of stale air and polished wood. Judge Caroline Moore presided, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She was known to be uncompromising and fair a stickler for following both the spirit and letter of the law. Thomas started the proceedings. Your Honor, we are uncertain as to why this hearing has been convened. My client's will is in order, and there is no legitimate contest from any party that we're aware of. Elise Rodriguez stood up next. On behalf of Mrs. Sienna Roth, we also have not initiated any formal challenge. However, given that the unborn child is a beneficiary, we have questions about the will's provisions. Judge Moore remained composed. I've received documentation indicating a potential discrepancy between the original will and its latest revision. There's also mention of newly discovered evidence. She shuffled some papers. The court must ensure the unborn child's interests are protected. That's why we are here. Jordan exchanged a bewildered glance with Thomas. Neither had submitted additional evidence. Who had? Then a court clerk stepped forward, handing a sealed envelope to Judge Moore. This arrived in the judge's chambers via certified mail last week, he explained. It was marked Urgent Re, the estate of Jordan Roth. We verified the authenticity of the signature. Sienna's eyes widened. She recognized the envelope, a plain white one, but with her own handwriting. She felt her heart stutter. It was her letter, but how Judge Moore carefully unsealed the envelope, pulling out several sheets of paper covered in neat handwriting. She skimmed the letter, her brows knitting. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she cleared her throat and said, "I have before me a personal letter from Mrs. Sienna Roth, written some time ago. It raises serious concerns about the nature of the revised will and her knowledge or lack thereof regarding its provisions." Sienna felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Relief, fear, betrayal, and confusion, all colliding in her chest. She never meant for the letter to end up here, at least not like this. Had Emily Henderson, her trusted friend, found it and mailed it? Or had someone else intervened? Jordan shifted uncomfortably as the judge continued. "Given the gravity of the statements made, I must ask Mrs. Roth, did you compose this letter, and do you stand by its contents?" Sienna rose on trembling legs, eyes glistening with tears. She nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. I wrote it." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Moore inhaled deeply, focusing her gaze on Jordan. "I will now read portions of this letter into the record as it is relevant to the unborn child's interests." Jordan paled. Celeste stiffened. Thomas frowned. Sienna clutched Elisa's hand, bracing herself. In the hush that followed, Judge Moore began to read aloud the intimate, heartbreaking words Sienna had poured onto paper in her darkest hour, words that would change everything. "I'm scared of what this family is turning into." Judge Moore read her voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. "I'm scared my husband will do anything to preserve his empire, even if it means erasing my worth in his life. Yet I still love him. I still believe we can be the family we once dreamed of being. If only he'd see me, hear me, trust me." Sienna's cheeks flushed as the judge's solemn tone revealed her deepest fears and vulnerabilities. She clutched her belly, feeling the baby's soft movements, a reminder that she was fighting not just for herself, but for their child. Each sentence hung like a heavy weight in the air. The entire courtroom transfixed. Jordan stared at the floor. Every line of Sienna's letter cut him like a knife laying bare. The guilt, the love, and the betrayal he had tried so desperately to deny. Celeste tightened her jaw, her fingers gripping the edge of her seat. Thomas scribbled notes, his mind racing through legal strategies. The judge paused, letting the words settle before continuing. "I worry that our child will grow up without the love of a father who's too busy guarding his fortune. I wish we could return to the days when Jordan would read Toni Morrison with me, sipping tea and sharing dreams of what we could build together. I've lost that man. Maybe if someone else sees this letter, they'll understand how desperately I need help, how desperately I want to be heard." When Judge Moore finished reading, the courtroom remained in tense silence. She set down the letter and looked at Sienna. "Mrs. Roth, the sentiments you've expressed are profound. They show a strong emotional and financial concern for your child's future. This court must ensure that any revisions to Mr. Roth's will do not unjustly penalize you or the child." Sienna nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. All I wanted was for Jordan to trust me, for us to be a family. I never wanted this to become a spectacle." Her words lit a spark in Jordan. He stood abruptly. "I didn't plan to hurt you," he said, his voice trembling. "I was afraid of losing control, of losing everything my family built. But reading this, hearing it out loud—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Celeste rose, determined not to yield. "Your Honor, my son has a right to protect his assets. This letter, while heartfelt, doesn't negate the fact that we must ensure the Roth empire remains secure. We can't let emotions override prudent estate planning." Judge Moore held up a hand. "Roth, I appreciate your perspective, but this matter is about balancing the father's right to manage his estate with the mother's and unborn child's equitable claim. I will not allow a will that effectively marginalizes an unborn child's mother without due process." At that moment, a wave of realization washed over Jordan. He understood that no matter how carefully he arranged his assets, he had endangered the most important bond in his life. The court had just become the battlefield for a war. He and his mother orchestrated a war that threatened to destroy the very family he once claimed to protect. The judge called for a short recess, leaving a stunned gallery in her wake. Jordan slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Sienna, her strength momentarily bolstered by the judge's words, walked out of the courtroom with Elise. Thomas chased after Jordan, whispering about damage control. Celeste stood in stony silence, refusing to show any crack in her composed exterior. Secrets had spilled, but the fallout was only beginning. The next step would determine whether Jordan and Sienna could salvage their love, or if the Roth name would finally fracture under the weight of greed, pride, and betrayal. The courthouse corridor buzzed with tension during the recess. Photographers milled about, hoping to capture a telling expression or confrontation. Bodyguards held them at bay, forming a protective wall around Jordan, Sienna, and their attorneys. Sienna slipped into a quiet alcove near the vending machines, Elise by her side. She breathed deeply, grateful for a moment of peace. Elise touched her shoulder gently. "You handled that with grace. I'm proud of you for standing your ground." Sienna offered a weak smile. "I never intended to drag all of this into public view. But maybe it's for the best. At least now my voice is heard." On the other side of the corridor, Jordan stood with Thomas Celeste a few feet away, with arms crossed. Thomas spoke in hushed urgency. "We can negotiate a settlement, rework, the will to be more balanced. The court is looking for fairness, Jordan." This letter changed the narrative. If we don't bend, the judge could rule in a way that puts everything in jeopardy. Jordan looked pained, torn between pride and regret. He glanced at Celeste, who wore a stern expression. "Don't let emotion cloud your judgment," she warned. "We can fight this we fight this. We have the resources, the legal team. But at what cost?" Jordan interrupted, his voice hoarse. He massaged his temples, exhaustion lining his features. "That letter wasn't just a plea for money. It was a plea for me, for who I used to be. I can't lose my wife and child over a will." Celeste's eyes flashed, but before she could respond, Jordan turned to Thomas. "Talk to Elise. I want a draft of a new agreement, one that doesn't shut Sienna out. We'll ensure the child's inheritance is secure. But I won't strip Sienna of her rightful share." Thomas nodded, relief evident in his posture. "I'll see what I can do. But you need to make peace with Sienna. This isn't just a legal matter. It's personal." As the recess ended, Both parties reconvened in the courtroom. This time, Jordan requested to speak. "Your Honor." He began, standing tall yet subdued. "I'd like to propose an amendment to my estate plan that ensures fair provision for my wife Sienna and our unborn child. I acknowledge that the current version of my will is overly restrictive. I wish to rectify that." A soft murmur rippled through the attendees. Sienna looked at Jordan, surprise and cautious hope mingling in her eyes. Judge Moore nodded. "I see. Let's set a time frame for you and your counsel to draft a new proposal. We'll reconvene in 1 week." After the judge adjourned the hearing, Jordan approached Sienna. Their bodyguards, attorneys, and even Celeste hovered at a discreet distance. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I lost sight of what matters." I let fear and outside pressures. Sienna blinked back tears, holding up a hand to gently hush him. She wasn't ready to forgive instantly. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw a hint of the man she once fell in love with. Quietly, she said, "Let's just focus on what's best for the baby." Jordan nodded, relief softening his features. "Yes. The baby. And maybe, one day, us." He reached for her hand. She hesitated, but then allowed their fingers to intertwine briefly, a silent acknowledgement that they were both responsible for healing the rift. Neither knew if their marriage could be salvaged, but for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. 1 week after the emotional courtroom showdown, the parties reconvened in Judge Moore's chambers. This time, the energy in the room was markedly different. Gone was the combative atmosphere of the initial hearing. In its place stood a more measured and focused tone as both sides sought resolution. Thomas Harrington and Elise Rodriguez had worked closely to revise the estate plan. The updated documents included revised clauses that granted Sienna a clear, protected position as a co-beneficiary and legal guardian, while simultaneously ensuring the financial stability of Roth Global Investments. A structured trust was established for the child Harper May Roth to ensure inheritance rights were preserved without granting unchecked authority to any single party. Judge Moore reviewed the amended documentation thoroughly. After several minutes, she addressed the room. "This plan appears equitable. It acknowledges the interests of all involved with appropriate safeguards for the unborn child. Are all parties in agreement with this submission?" Jordan and Sienna both responded affirmatively. Elise nodded. Even Celeste Roth, though visibly reluctant, gave a brief confirmation without objection. The judge concluded, "This court accepts the revised estate plan as submitted. The record will reflect the changes, and I consider this matter resolved contingent on proper filing." With a firm strike of her gavel, the legal dispute came to an official close. Outside the courthouse, a cluster of reporters awaited comments. Given the high-profile nature of the case, speculation about the Roth family's internal affairs had spread through both financial and social media outlets. Jordan Roth, flanked by Thomas, gave a concise statement. "My wife and I have resolved our differences privately and respectfully with the guidance of the court. We're focused on moving forward as a family. No further statements will be given at this time." He then declined all further questions. Sienna exited quietly through a side entrance, accompanied by Elise. She made no public comment, choosing instead to maintain personal boundaries and privacy for herself and her unborn child. In the following months, the Roth household underwent significant changes. Jordan and Sienna began attending weekly therapy sessions. In these meetings, facilitated by a licensed clinical psychologist, they reviewed Sienna's letter again, this time in a safe, confidential setting. Jordan acknowledged the harm his decisions had caused, including his over-reliance on his mother's advice and his lack of transparency. He committed to regaining Sienna's trust through sustained behavioral change. Celeste Roth, faced with the consequences of her involvement, agreed at Jordan's insistence to step back from active involvement in both personal and corporate affairs. While her influence within Roth Global Investments remained structurally intact, she was no longer permitted to interfere in Jordan and Sienna's domestic matters. The birth of Harper May Roth marked a pivotal point. The delivery, though stressful, concluded safely. Jordan was present throughout, offering steady support. When he held Harper for the first time, he experienced an emotional reckoning. He acknowledged both privately and publicly that fatherhood carried a weight and purpose no legal clause could replicate. Sienna, while still cautious, began to observe the consistency in Jordan's actions. He reduced his corporate hours, delegated more responsibility to his executive team, and prioritized evenings with his family. He instituted a weekly family night, setting aside uninterrupted time with Sienna and Harper. Weekend getaways to quieter locations. Upstate became a regular practice, replacing the high society galas they once frequented. Professionally, Sienna returned to her philanthropic work with renewed focus. She expanded her non-profit's reach into several underserved school districts, providing books, literacy workshops, and teacher training grants. With Jordan's support, now given without precondition, the non-profit secured additional funding through the Roth Foundation, ensuring sustainability beyond personal involvement. Together, Jordan and Sienna co-founded the Harper Fund, a new initiative under the Roth philanthropic umbrella. Its mission was to fund educational scholarships for girls in economically disadvantaged communities across the U.S. The initiative garnered positive media attention, reframing the couple's public image from that of a fractured dynasty to one invested in inclusive and meaningful change. Despite outward appearances, Sienna remained pragmatic. The emotional scars of the legal dispute and the original will's betrayal did not disappear overnight. But the steady progression toward accountability, legal, emotional, and relational, provided the necessary foundation for reconciliation. Over time, their relationship stabilized. Though not without setbacks, Jordan's continuous efforts, both personal and structural, restored much of the broken trust. They were no longer a storybook couple shaped by wealth and appearances, but rather two individuals who had learned through experience how fragile trust is and how deliberate one must be in rebuilding it. In a secured drawer in Sienna's home office, she kept a sealed envelope containing the original letter. Its ink had faded slightly with time, but the words remained intact. It served not as a weapon or a reminder of pain, but as a documented turning point. The letter had given her a voice when she felt silenced. Now it served as proof that speaking the truth, even quietly, could alter the course of a life. Jordan Roth, once known solely for corporate ambition, would one day be remembered not just as a businessman, but as a man who nearly lost everything and chose instead to change. Not because of a court order or public pressure, but because a woman who loved him dared to write the truth, and the law had dared to listen. Their true legacy was no longer held in investment portfolios or real estate holdings. It now lived in something more enduring: honesty, accountability, and the family they had chosen again to become. In the face of unimaginable betrayal and legal battles, a single letter became the voice of truth, a plea that transcended the glitter of Manhattan high society and the ambitions of a sprawling financial empire. Ultimately, love, integrity, and the promise of a shared future prevailed. Yet this cautionary tale reminds us that power can corrupt even the most heartfelt of bonds unless tempered by honesty and empathy. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the triumph of truth and the resilience of love, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who appreciate real-life drama with a dash of hope, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll help us continue bringing you stories that inspire, provoke thought, and remind us all that in life's toughest trials, the heart's deepest truths can still shine through.